everyone. I'm Rachael Johns, author of rural romance and women's fiction. And my next book is The Work Wives, which is out in November. But today, I'm delighted to be chatting to you. Addie, my dog, and I, for those watching online, can see that I've got a dog here with me because she wants to be in on the action. So Addie, my dog, and I today are delighted to be talking to my friend and author extraordinaire, Maisey Yates. Hi, Maisey.
Hi, Rach. It's good to see you again.
Yes, it hasn't been that long. We were recently together at the Romance Writers of Australia conference where Maisey was the closing keynote speaker. And that's one of the reasons that Pamela and I decided we'd love to get Maisey on Rights for Women, because her keynote speech was just fabulous. So much wisdom and information. And so we're going to get onto that in a moment. But first, for anyone who doesn't know, I am really got a dog here harassing me. I'm sorry for anyone. For anyone who doesn't know Maisey, I'm just going to read you a little bit of introduction. Now, as well as listening to Maisey talk to her keynote at the Romance Writers Australia conference recently, I also had the pleasure of interviewing her and Kelly Rimmer and Zoe York on a panel. And I decided that instead of reading their bios, I would hunt down some goss on them on the internet. It was a little bit easier because I know Maisey reasonably well. So I thought I'd read that intro for you today. So according to TikTok, Maisey Yates is a New York Times bestselling author of those books. And for anyone who can't see this, I'm using inverted commas because that's the way she describes them. Her kids think she's cringe. And I can totally relate to that. I think anyone with teenage kids can, it would be a miracle if they didn't think you're cringe.
I think it's wrong if your kids don't think you're cringe.
True, that's probably true. It's part of our duty to embarrass them and do crazy things. According to Twitter, her house hasn't been clean since 2009. I can totally relate to that as well, though I'm not sure my house has ever been clean. But 2009, was that when you got published or when you started?
Yes. Well, it was when I got my first contract. So yeah, so no books out yet, but yeah.
That's right. So Maisey's a couple of years ahead of me in the publishing journey. I probably started writing a long time before Maisey because I started when I was very young. Maisey's a few years younger than me, so she was probably in early high school when I started writing, I think. But Maisey beat me to the publication thing. But we actually also met each other before publication. We were both targeting Harlequin, Mills and Boon, and we met on some writing forums there. So we've known each other quite a long time. And yes, when she's not writing, she's hanging out with her kids, her gorgeous husband, who I have to say does actually look like a romance novel hero.
Does.
Well done there.
Quite the Duke on the Bridgerton series, I think.
Yes, and if you check out Maisey's probably Instagram and TikTok,
yeah,
you can see him playing that role a little bit, kind of in
yes,
her.
He did buy a top hat.
It's awesome. Maisey likes knitting, crafting, and baking, I think. And as you can see if you're watching along, she's also a Diet Coke drinker. So basically, we're here to tell you tonight that the key to being a best-selling successful author has nothing to do with hard work, nothing to do with luck, like people will tell you. It's all about Diet Coke. Do you reckon, Maisey?
You can't prove otherwise.
No, I pretty much all successful authors I know drink Diet Coke. And no, this is not a sponsored Diet Coke podcast, but maybe.
But if you wanted to send us some free Diet Coke,
we're onto it. Yes. She lives in picturesque Oregon, and I have been to Oregon, not near where Maisey lives, and I do adore it. So it's such a beautiful place. I'm very jealous. And you can check out, some of her surrounds on Instagram, where she shares some beautiful pictures of hiking and different things like that. Maisey has a penchant for small animals, which is kind of cool considering there's a large animal, or reasonably large animal, in my office at the moment harassing me. And what are you showing?
I have a lot of little animal things littered around my desk. That's my little mouse.
Oh, it's so cute.
And I have a raccoon and an owl. And there he is. He's within arm's reach. I have some little mice.
I love it.
Badger, but I can't reach him. So yeah, I like small animals.
And sometimes they feature in your books, which is pretty cool and kind of fun. So yeah, I think in your previous life you were probably a Disney princess because you seem to really love Disneyland or Disney World.
Yeah, I like to think so.
So that's a bit about you as a person. But as a writer, you have written a zillion books, I'd say. What's the accurate total? Do we know your accurate total?
I believe it's 152 and a half, because I'm halfway through.
That is so impressive. It's funny because whenever I do a podcast where I'm on the chair, in the chair where you are rather than the interviewer, or I'm doing talking to a journalist or something, they always like, wow, you've written so many books in such a short time. And probably in about the same time as Maisey, I've written between 25 and 30. And so I kind of think, you have no idea. I've written like nothing compared to some people. And I just am in so much awe of you, because not only does Maisey write amazing books and writes fast, but she's written in a number of different, I'm not going to say genres, because I think women's fiction and romance are quite closely related, but how would you describe it?
I always say, like, because I get it, sometimes people will describe women's fiction, they're like, oh, you know, it's more than romance. And I think sometimes that sounds like you're being negative about romance or whatever.
Which we
I always like to think of it as, it's more like the camera is focused on a different part of like the heroine's life.
Totally.
Where it's more about like the core journey of the book is not necessarily the romance. The romance, like mine have all had romances in them, and they are part of her journey, but there's a broader camera lens, like a broader camera angle. Like you've zoomed out on her life. And so you're looking at, you know, more of her like relationship with her parents and her sisters, and you're having all those kinds of things get resolved like on the page. Whereas in a romance, those things may happen, but the focus is going to stay on how the romance heals both of them. And that's another thing. One thing I love about women's fiction and the heroes that I put in women's fiction is that a lot of times, I would say the one that you're holding in your hand, there's an exception to that. But like in The Lost and Found Girl, one of the guys is kind of a disaster, but like, I love him. But I would say in general, it's like, it's not his journey.
Yeah. I know.
So even if he is a character who changes over the course of the book, that isn't his journey, is not the focus.
Yeah.
So they kind of sometimes get to be more wish fulfillment, like they're there to support her journey, whereas in a romance, it's much more shared. And so I would say like those are the main differences to me. And also in general, women's fiction doesn't have to have romance, and those romance don't have to end happily, but mine do.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I have so many readers that are so loyal, and to mess around with that expectation would be kind of disrespectful to that. I think. Plus, I don't want to read that either. So
no, and we'll definitely get to that, because I think in your keynote you did talk about, you know, thinking about the reader as well as yourself in writing. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you a little bit about that. I probably should say that, I've got two books in my hand. One of them is quite recent, and one of them's a little older. Maisey Yates' latest book is actually it might not be the latest by now by the time we it is.
There is a presents, but it's okay.
Okay, because Maisey writes for Harlequin Presents, Harlequin Desire. She writes single title cowboy kind of books, The Small Town for HQN, and she also now, as I said, writes women's fiction. I've probably missed out a number of things in there as well, because you've done quite a few different projects.
I wouldn't remember.
But I just thought I would just give a general introduction. So recently at the conference, you did a keynote talking about your 13 years in publishing and the things you'd learnt along the way. And I just know that I had so many people talk about how inspiring they found that. And as well as being inspiring, what I really loved about it, I found myself nodding a lot, is that it was so honest. And I think you told a few hard truths about the publishing industry, but in a nice kind of, in a positive way, if that makes sense.
Well, I said this in my speech too. It's like, at the end of the day, whatever hard truths there are, and there are hard truths, it's a competitive industry.
Yes.
If it was as easy as like just showing up and writing a book, that's like kind of the minimum cost of entry.
Yeah.
So it's like, which is quite difficult, because in your real life, people are like, oh, you wrote a book, that's amazing. Publishing, that's not amazing. That's like we all do that.
Yes.
So you've got to get over that really quickly. But like, I think so if it was easy, like everybody could just do it. and everyone would have instant success because that's what we would all choose.
I'm going to put my dog outside. Hang on. Pamela will hopefully edit this. Sorry, do you want to sort of go back to that we all choose?
Yeah. So I think, if it was easy, and if there were no struggles, then everyone would be as successful as they wanted to be. But obviously that's not the case. But having said that, it is still something that I would choose, which is why to me, it's like, it isn't like, I never want to be discouraging by offering hard truths. And I temper it by saying, even knowing everything I know and having failed in the ways that I have and succeeded in the ways that I have, this is still the path that I would choose.
Yeah.
And I think that, I never understood why people said, I used to think this was the most discouraging thing. And I still think it's not phrased well for people who are just entering the publishing industry, but it's something I understand after 13 years, which is, if you can do anything else, do that.
Yes.
And I used to think, gosh, that's so negative. But now I'm like, oh no, I get it now, because having been through everything I have, and having it not be new and shiny and all that kind of stuff anymore, I would still do it.
Yeah.
And there really isn't anything else I would choose. And so I kind of see the
same, and there's nothing else I can do now.
Oh, I'm like, I have no other skills. I haven't been employed for years. So
but I think I completely agree. And I often say to people, people come up and they'll say, oh, I really want to write a book, but I've tried and I'm thinking of giving up because I've got like one rejection or something. I really want to be an author, but I've got, one rejection, or I've done, done this. It's so hard. And I think when they say they're thinking of giving up, they want you to say, no, don't give up. It's great. You should. But I always say, well, if you can, do. Because I think it's exactly what you're saying. It's not easy. It's not for everyone. And there's definitely easier ways to make a living. But if you can't give up, then this is what you're supposed to do. And so try to give up. And if you can't, then maybe readjust what you want, because it can't be about the money and the success really in the end. And that's also a lot what you touched on. So let's get into the things you did.
Yeah.
So I want to start with number one. What was your number one sort of thought for everyone?
My first thing is that only writing teaches you how to write.
Love that.
Because I think that as people collectively, we all like to feel prepared. Like nobody likes to feel new or like we don't know what we're doing. And so we think we can trick the learning process if we just collect enough information or the right information, and then we'll never feel lost or like we're failing.
Mm-hmm. Hence all the craft books on my shelf behind me.
And the motif of my speech was, bad news.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I've written 2.5 books. And the last
book is very important.
It's very important because I wrote 50,000 words last week. Thank you. And I am going to marinate in
Excuse
that.
me while I fall off my chair.
It wasn't fun, Rach, but then this is how I schedule things. I'm like, I want to take like 2 weeks off at Christmas.
Yep.
And I'm taking a couple weeks off to do, I'm going on tour with Hazelbeck as their assistant. I'm just going to be their assistant at their book events for their book, Small Town, Big Magic. And so I'm taking all this time off, and I had taken 2-3 weeks off to go to Australia and New Zealand. So then that just requires hustle when I'm back at the desk. So, but
anyway, sorry, I'll stop.
So book 150, which I wrote really right before I went to Australia, was just hideous. And it felt like I was new and lost and failing. And that's because every story is different and your process shifts over time, which I think is the great thing about being a writer. I think that's why it always keeps me engaged, because it's a discovery process every time. But there's no amount of experience or education that could have prepared me for the fact that that book was going to be difficult, because some books just are, and you actually can't avoid discomfort or feeling like you suck. Sucking is inevitable, and feeling like you suck even when you don't is a guarantee. And feeling lost in your own mediocrity is just Tuesday.
Yes,
I actually find cheering, because then it means that I don't have to do anything in response to that negative feeling. And once I've accepted that I'm not going to avoid bad feelings and that I may not feel prepared ever, then I might as well dive in. And only the act of writing is going to show you how you write.
Yes.
To me, that is the only thing you really need to know. And I'm not saying like craft books and workshops and all of that can't support that, but I do think that it is really, there is the most education to be had is in the act of actually doing it and writing books from beginning to end.
Yes.
Not getting stuck in that cycle of writing like a partial, the first 3 chapters, either for contests or for submission, but actually learning how, like the ways that you always get hung up, and like how like which things you miss when you're creating a character or a plot and all of that kind of stuff. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of like practicing finishing.
Yes.
At whatever pace.
Would you say then that, like you mentioned, you know, not doing just getting first partials and first chapters and all that kind of stuff. But what about those people, you know, that are so, I think there's a few writers, especially starting, they're so excited about their concept. So they write this book and it doesn't sell, or whatever, but then they just keep rewriting and rewriting. Do you think that's learning, or you need to, at one stage, you know, just go, that book for now, I'm just putting it away and I need to write another one to learn more?
I think that there is definitely something to that. There's a lot to be learned from revising, especially if you're getting valuable feedback. But I do think there has to be a point where you do move on to something else, because you could be your own worst enemy, kind of being married to something that's not in the moment saleable. That doesn't mean it won't ever be, but you may have to go get that information that you need to make it saleable or to make it great from writing something else. And you may learn something from a different manuscript. I was writing new books while I was waiting to hear back when I did my first submission, and I was in the slush pile. So it would be months and months and months before I would hear back on whatever revision I had done with the editor of Harlequin. And so in between that, I would write just the next manuscript. So it was like I was always writing something new and then going back to revise. And I actually think that was really, really useful, because I did learn so much writing those new books, even though I hadn't gotten feedback on them. I was kind of like, oh, I see how, you know, I had this editorial feedback for the book I just revised, and now I'm taking something from scratch and applying that. And it would just teach me something different every time. So I definitely think there is wisdom in setting things aside, and that setting things aside doesn't mean it was wasted time.
No.
Doesn't mean you won't do anything with it. And even if you don't, it's all still a learning process. Like it's part of educating yourself. Like you're going, it's like going to school for writing.
Yeah, which we need to do in a way, but not, but anyway. So number 1 was writing only writing teaches you how to write. So what about number 2?
That ego and humility have to coexist in your body.
I love that. Ego and humility. Tell us about that.
You have to have an ego if you're going to succeed in this business, because like the world and publishing in general will do everything that it can to dull your shine. And I just think that you have to believe in your work with full conviction. And you have to believe in your right to tell stories and in the importance of your voice and in your stories. And it's tempting to believe that a list or a sales milestone or a certain number of good reviews will give this to you. But yet again, I have bad news. No one and nothing is going to give you the external validation that you need to feel complete. Like you're never going to like get this just one compliment and then you'll be like, oh, I guess that's enough. I feel good about myself forever. You know, that's not how that
always shifting, aren't they? Like as soon as you hit the New York Times bestseller list or something, oh, that's nice for now, but now I want to hit it again or again.
Yeah, you want to hit it again, and what if you don't, and all this kind of stuff. And there's a quote from Cher, the singer, where her mother had reportedly said to her that she needed to kind of give up what she was doing and marry a rich man. And she said, "Mom, I am a rich man."
I love that.
So I think that you have to believe that you are a rich man.
Yes, that is great.
And but at the same time, it is so important to be able to take feedback. It is so important to be able to have humility when the trusted people in your writing life come back to you and say, this needs work.
Yeah.
And I know of writers who quit taking that feedback because they hit a certain place and they didn't have to anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the book suffered for it. Like as a reader, I could see that had happened.
Definitely.
And so
I can see that with some people too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, it's like you do always have to like be very, very confident in yourself, but then also have the confidence that you can make the book better.
Yeah.
It's really all about taking your ego like and marrying it with the humility, because it's like, yeah, I can take that feedback and I know that I can make the book better. But you do have to be kind of teachable, and you have to be willing to do the work to improve everything you do.
And it's that confidence in knowing that if you put the hard work in, you actually can do it.
Yeah,
Self-belief. Yeah. How do you think, you know, it's all very well to say, oh, we just believe in ourselves. Is there any tricks or tips like to, you know, keep believing in yourself? How do you do that?
I mean, I recommend being stubborn because and motivated by spite, because I find that to be very helpful, because then when you are in a bad space, you usually have a bad object.
Yeah.
And you can be like, well, I'm not going to go away because you think that I should.
I love it.
You've done something. I mean, that's a terrible answer. I would be a bad motivational speaker, but there's nothing wrong with being motivated by pettiness.
I love it.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that's all you have.
Yeah.
But other times I think, you know, I look back at all the books that I've written, and I think you can do that. Just look back at the paragraph that you've written.
Yeah.
It's like you're doing it.
That's
more than most people.
Yeah.
So you deserve to be here.
That is very true. I think, yeah, looking back on what you've done and how far you've come sometimes, because it's so easy to see what you haven't done or what you think you should be doing, rather than, you know, actually go, wow, I have done a few good. And yeah, if you've written a book before, in theory, and if you've written 152 or even 25, you should be able to do it again.
Yes. Yeah. Although sometimes I do think this will be the one that gets me.
Oh, I think that all the time, every time I start, or every time I
there you go. If anybody out there is struggling with confidence, just know that we also think this will be the one we can't finish.
And I wonder if we ever got to the stage where we were like totally confident all the time, as you said, maybe then the books would suffer, because we wouldn't be, you know, trying our best to not suck, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't know that that's possible as a human. I think we are works in progress always, which I will talk about that more as we go on. But it's like, to me, I think people are so obsessed with reaching destinations and having things like organized forever, or you always have a work-life balance or whatever. And it's like, I just don't think that's possible. I think you're always going to be like, hey, like, let's get your confidence together, like, or hey, tone your ego down a little bit. Like, you're always correcting and overcorrecting, and you know, I mean, because that's just
because we're not perfect.
Human condition, really.
True. So, we're all flawed characters.
Yeah, exactly.
So, are we up to number 3 now? Yeah.
And that is that you need to be both emotional and cerebral. Your head and your heart need to be engaged in order to make a satisfying career in publishing. Because being a commercial fiction author is an uncomfortable tightrope to walk, because art and commerce will always be uncomfortable bedfellows. But the reality is, if you want readers, you have to think about the market that you're writing for. And I don't think this is in conflict with writing the book of your heart. I've written many books and I want to write many more. And a piece of my heart is in all of them. There's no one book of my heart. As my life changes, there are new stories that I want to tell based on these new things I've learned and experienced. And what was the book of my heart 10 years ago, like the ultimate book of my heart, would not be the ultimate book of my heart now, because I've been through different things and I have different things that I want to explore. And the way that I do this is when I sit down and I plan a series or a pitch for a publisher, I always ask myself first if I can sell it. Not just to a publisher, but will there be a lot of people out there who want to read it? A lot of people. And I try not to trick myself into thinking, well, even though I can see X and Y doesn't perform well, I might be special enough to transcend it, because I've kind of been around too long to hope for that kind of thing.
Can you just explain that a little bit more, like what you mean exactly by that? So people following trends and things like that, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you can't follow trends exactly, because literally anything, unless you're self-publishing, anything that you see happening in publishing happened 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In process. So it is really to look at something that's hitting really big, to look at Emily Henry and go, I'm going to write a book themed book, or I'm going to look at Ali Hazelwood and I'm going to write something set in academia. Yeah. There's going to already be 15 people behind her that have already done deals, and their books are going to come out before you. Yes, you know, so it's like chasing trends doesn't work either. But I think there are certain things that you can kind of look at and say, that's historically not going to do very well. I'm trying to like pull something out of thin air, but I'm having trouble with
that's
that.
all good.
Like,
I think you said it there.
Because you see that sometimes where people are like, oh, well, I'm gonna like sometimes this works. So I'm saying this in a really generic sense. Sometimes it does work in like kind of male female contemporary romance to gender swap something, but often it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because there's very specific reasons people want the hero to have a certain level of power.
Yeah.
A certain level of competence. Like nobody wants a man that's a total project. So it's like, while you might have a niche readership for a book like that, it may never be broad.
Yeah.
And if you kind of look at that, and then again, that's the other thing. It's like, that doesn't mean there's no readership for something.
But you're looking at something that's going to, if you're a commercial fiction writer who wants,
if you want to cast a wider net than that, or you have to be completely okay with the fact that you may be aiming for a niche, which is actually fine. But what I always tell people is that you do have to be honest with yourself about that.
Yeah.
Like you have to make these decisions with your eyes open.
So you make those decisions before you start writing. You do that.
Absolutely. Like, and a lot of it is, what is the top line marketing pitch for the book? Mm-hmm. Like, is there for me? Is it cowboys? That's my easy niche in the market.
Yeah.
That helps me sell books. I can do anything emotionally with that framework. You can tell a deep story about loss and grief and finding new love again, and you can set it on a ranch or you can set it in a city. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can tell the emotional core that you want wrapped in whatever kind of saleable package is working for you or working in the moment. And it can be historical, contemporary, paranormal. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I do a whole workshop on core story, and that's what it's about. It's about the fact that like the pieces that are personal and that are emotional and are your heart travel with you through me through Presents, Desire, HQN, women's fiction. It doesn't matter, you know. It's like, so you can kind of look critically and go, well, I want, you know, to aim broadly as far as the like the package goes, and then I always just write the book from my heart. Like the concept is more geared toward the marketing aspect, but the actual like soul of the book is just emotional for me.
I love
and like I said, I think that if you have a book in your heart and it makes no marketable sense, like absolutely write the book, but just be very honest with yourself about what that might lead to, which does like lead nicely into my fourth point, which is that you have to know what you want.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually so much more challenging to discern than it seems like, because it should seem obvious. But I actually have met so many writers that have a hard time with that, because you're like, as an artist, do you get to admit, I want to make money doing this?
Yes.
Is it okay to say I want to be a bestseller? Because that's an ego thing. And do I want books on shelves when like you should be okay with just having an ebook or whatever? Do you want to be with a traditional publisher when people are telling you, but you should just go indie, but that's not what you want?
Yes.
Or you do want to go indie and people are telling you you need to be with a traditional publisher, but you don't care.
Yeah.
So it's like all these things, there's no wrong answer, and nobody gets to tell you whether or not it's something that matters, because it matters to you. And that is the, like, to me, that's so important, because I see a lot of people who get caught in cycles where they are dissatisfied, and it is because they are not being super honest about what their real goal is.
Yeah.
So they're like, I don't care about money, I just want to write whatever I want. And then they're angry because so few people
are not making money.
Well, even if it's not, and money is probably part of it, but even if it's just they're not getting read.
Yeah.
If we want to be read, we would keep the books on our hard drive.
That's so true.
Know? But it's like, but they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and they're not teachable or flexible. Yeah. And they're going, I'm bitter and upset about what's happening. It's like, but you're not looking at where this is where you actually want to go. You do care about this. It's okay. You don't have to be ashamed that you want to make money. Yeah. Or that you want to hit a list, or that you want acclaim, or that you want 10,000 people to read your book. Like, let's say. And
how do you think that helps? If you know what you want,
yeah.
how does that help you?
I think that's what helps you point yourself there.
Right.
I mean, in fiction, it's very important that your characters have goals. That's the
Yes.
engine that drives your story.
Yep.
If you, as an author, don't have a goal,
then
when it comes to figuring out what am I going to sit down to write, what am I going to do with it, you don't know. And if you don't know, how are you going to make forward motion? And I think
that makes
and
sense.
you have to direct yourself in the right way. And then I think too, you have to be okay when your goals change.
Yeah.
Because you get something and you do tend to want more. That is just, again, this is human nature. And I think, you know, being honest about that and taking the time to sit back and go, well, what do I want right now? What am I not like, what do I need to leave behind? What do I need to take with me? And where do I need to be headed toward? Like, I just think you always have to be checking in with yourself like you would a character of your book.
Yeah.
Be like, what is your long range goal? What is your short range goal? Who hurt you?
Your emotional goal. What's your external goal?
Yeah. And now that this other thing has happened, do you want something else? You know, like, so,
no, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. Just, I think we need to be brutally honest with ourselves. And that is really the only way that you can kind of, to the best of your ability, because we can't control everything in this industry. It's more like you're in a boat floating on the ocean and you're kind of at the mercy of the sea, but you can point yourself in a different direction and maybe it's gonna, I mean, that's super
great, no, but that's a great analogy. Yeah. So taking number 5 now.
Yes. I think that, you know, your goals are going to shift, and that's a good thing to be aware of, because creativity is an ever expanding resource, which is point 5. I used to think that if I tried something new, that I would forget what I knew how to do. But creativity never shrinks, it expands. So the more that you try, the more that you can do. It actually kind of goes back to what you said about, you know, well, should you put the book away or should you write something else? It's like, the more that you use your creativity, the more expansive it becomes. So that's where it's like, always write a different book, because it's going to teach you something. Always try something out there. And like, I wrote a middle grade like a year ago that I sent to my agent, and then she like never read it, which is fine. I think it was not good, but it was like a learning process.
Yeah.
And I don't regret having written it. And I don't even think I necessarily want to do anything with it. Like, I just kind of did it.
Yeah.
And there it is. And like, I think,
has anyone, have you got your children to read it? I'm just curious.
No, well, they don't read. It's terrible. Like my oldest son kind of does, occasionally. Like,
they go to the stage in life where they just don't really read.
I know. And then like, my daughter has to read so much for school. It's like, she doesn't want to do it. So it's like,
no, I love that. Creativity is a never expanding. Is it never? Yeah, no.
Never expanding.
Never. I wrote never down. No, that is awesome. And does that go? We're going to have to change to our in a second. But does that go? Do you think creativity, being an ever expanding resource, do you think that doing things that are not specifically writing, like you do a lot of other creative things, how do you feel like that sort of fits in with your writing process?
I think it's a great way. Like, I do think that it is like this wonderful way to kind of foster creativity without pressure. I know you do sewing and stuff as well. And it's like, there's something really wonderful about making something that is just for me.
Yes, that's so true.
I'm not monetizing it. I'm not like asking anyone else's opinion. It is about whether or not I'm happy with it.
Yeah. And
so much of my other creativity goes to other people.
Yeah, that
it is about what they want and marketability, and I don't have to worry if the sweater I knitted is marketable.
You can just
people might think it's ugly, but it's for me. And so I do think that there is something in that. I think there's something that like helps keep your creativity kind of fresh.
Awesome. And that must bring us to number 6.
Yes, which is that ideas are cheap.
Oh, I love that.
A lot of great ideas, and a lot of people have them, but it's the execution and the actual writing that lead to a career. And I say this because it's easy to think that if someone's idea is similar to yours, there's no place for your book.
I actually agree with that so many times. It's been done before. Don't do it.
Yeah, I'm going to try to tell this story as quickly as possible because I'm conscious of the time, but I just think it's so weird and funny that when I was kind of writing and submitting to Harlequin, I had written all these books in between. Like I mentioned, like between revision steps and things like that. So I was writing these other things, and I wrote this book, and the working title was called The Sheik's Forbidden Virgin. And it was like my favorite thing I had ever written. And the hero was named Adam, and he was sent by his brother to capture Princess Isabella, who's trying to run away from an arranged marriage to the brother. But of course, when he like tries to bring her back to his brother, he ends up falling in love with her, super angsty, very in love. And like, then I literally like, I finished it, and I would always go to like the iHeart Presents blog and like check things out. And I literally opened up the blog to see Kate Hewitt doing an interview about her next release, which was called The Sheik's Forbidden Virgin, which was the exact same title as my working title. And the hero was named Arif, and he was sent to fetch his brother's fiance, Kalila, and falls in love with her. Wow. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's the same book, and it has the same working title, and no one is going to believe I didn't just copy her. Mm-hmm. And at some point I actually emailed her, and I didn't know her at all. I do know her now, and she's lovely. And I now trying to imagine her getting that email is so funny. But she was like, don't worry about it. Like, a lot of people could have that idea and the book would be totally different. Yeah. And then when I got published and I had that manuscript kind of finished, I did say to my editor, I was like, I would like to also send this one in, like, for you to look at. But like, it is really similar to this book by Kate Hewitt and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, that's fine. Yeah. And it was never a problem. Like, we're very different writers.
Did you read Kate's book?
I did. Yeah. At some point, like years later. Yeah. It was very different. Yeah. And she's a very different writer than I am. Like, she writes such lovely romantic emotion, and it's so gorgeous. Yeah. And I would say that her presents heroes are on the kind of softer side. Yes. And they're like very lovely romantic books. They're very fairy tale. Yeah. And mine are, my heroes are meaner and the books are a lot prettier. I'll say that. I like to think they also have a lot of emotion, but they're structured very differently in the way. Yeah. They're just very different, and they could never be the same. And so that's kind of my thing, is like, it's not the idea, it's what you do with it. And you can remember that the next time somebody says, I have an idea, you write it and we'll split the profits.
Yes. Which we hear all the time.
All the time. It's everybody has ideas. So, which brings me to number 7, which is, just because this is a dream job, that doesn't mean you'll be happy 100% of the time.
Amen.
And what I have noticed over the years in publishing is I have watched people torture themselves because they are not happy all the time. And like, they think that means something. Yeah. And they put all this extra pressure on themselves to be happy or to be like grateful in a way that you just can't always feel. It is a dream, but living the dream doesn't mean that you're filled with a sense of wild joy all the time. Okay. And I feel like we can feel extra obligated to enjoy our jobs when we're struggling because like our friends or our spouses or whatever are working jobs that are not dream jobs.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's like, oh, how do I, like, do I have the right to be ungrateful? And it's like, we're human, and it is hard enough to do this work without policing your feelings or putting pressure on yourself to feel things that you just don't feel. And I always say, like, first of all, who wants to do their job every day? Nobody does. Everybody struggles with wanting to get up and go to work, and a writer is no different, and we are allowed to have those feelings. And there's just no points for a good attitude. There are points for writing anyway, even when it sucks. Yeah. And you're going to feel like you suck. So good news, that's to be expected. It's just Tuesday. You can't avoid it. You might as well write anyway, but it's your dream job and you can cry if you want to.
I love that. So many people have said to me, oh, you're living my dream, aspiring authors and stuff. And I know, because we've both been there, but sometimes it's like, well, yeah, I'm living mine too, apparently. And the dream is not exactly everything I am.
And I think anything you do a lot of, anything you do all the time, or this is terrible and it is crass, and I'm going to say it anyway, because this is a podcast.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Well, it's like, when you're dreaming of a relationship, you're like, it's all Harlequin presents, right? Like the hero's taking you up to the penthouse and he's managing all your things and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, sometimes I just feel like I'm in a long-term relationship with publishing and I've seen them poop with the door open.
So true.
You're like, I'm not saying, I'm not saying I'm not committed, but I'm just saying I've seen things and like the mystery's gone.
That
so
wasn't
it's like,
what I thought you were going to say, but I just love that so much. So it's such an apt description. I thought you were going to say that sometimes, you know, when we first start wanting to write a book or publish, it's such a joyful thing to do. It's like our escape. It's a hobby. But then when your hobby or your passion becomes something that has to pay your bills, I feel like that changes it too. I don't know how
it absolutely does. And I think there is an incredible amount of pressure that kind of comes with that, with success or with failure, either to dig out of the failure or to repeat the success. And then at a certain point you're living like there are expectations of you.
Yeah.
And then you have to like meet those all the time. And that's an element of it. And then I think, you know, you've lost you lose the wonder. Like you're not like, oh, is my book magically going to do this? They're like, no, I know too much. I know it's not. So like we just kind of, you keep, and there's just so many elements to that when you've been in the industry for as many years as we have. And again, it's like, I would still choose it again with the marriage metaphor.
Yeah.
I would still choose it knowing everything that I know.
Yeah.
It almost comes from a deeper and more committed place that I can be like, today, I don't like doing this.
Yeah.
Today,
I don't like you, husband.
I love you. I'm like, but I'm still committed. And that is actually like that is a deeper relationship with it. So it's like, yeah, I'm living the dream, but I also know a little bit too much about it.
Running with the analogy quickly, I know we don't want to go into, but do you feel like, you know, a marriage needs to be nurtured still? You know, we'll talk about date nights and spending time with each other. So that's how you keep a love sometimes alive in a marriage. How do you keep your love alive for what you do, even though sometimes you don't love it? But how do you have to love it? You know, you have to love it other times. How do you keep it alive and keep coming back to it?
Partly by making sure that I'm writing variety.
Yeah.
Because that actually allows me, and then actually also having some things that have no pressure on them at all.
Yeah.
If I do, like the great thing about category romance is that like, this is like very boring publishing stuff, but it's like, they don't have to sell that into the store on your name or on the tropes. They just go where the category books are shelved. The readers are going to buy them if they're readers of that line. There's no promo that I can do. There's no TikTok dance that I'm going to do to get people to buy it. Nobody's buying anything from my TikTok dances anyway, but you see what I mean. So it's like to have something that is like, there is no big expectation on it. There is no pressure. It is actually something that is 100% a labor of love.
Yeah.
And of creativity. I'm not saying that also I don't get a monetary reward out of that, but it is something. I do have something I do under another name that makes no money, and I just do it because I like it. And I actually think it's things like that keep me. Then when I go back to the things that maybe are a little bit more high pressured, I'm refreshed and I enjoy that too. And so it's keeping the monotony at bay, really is what it is. So it is like date night with my writing.
I love that. And also, I just wanted to ask another question, because you mentioned right at the beginning that you were taking 2 weeks off soon. So you're working really hard. You also want to take time off at Christmas. You've taken time off out of your way in Australia. Do you think that scheduling, you know, sort of brain breaks, I guess they are, like, does that work for you? Some writers, you know, just continually write every day, all day. But how important do you
I have learned
breaks are?
I've learned that I am very cyclical, and I actually thrive on like periods of intense work.
Yeah.
And periods of time off. And I think maybe not named that for a long time. That was something I almost like just realized, because I came back from, it's like I knew it, but I thought of it more of a bug and not a feature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though it's kind of what I do naturally, where it's like I write a book and I don't start the next one right away. I would rather write something really quickly and then take some time off.
Yeah.
And so what I've learned is that I really thrive in short periods of like hyper focus, and then like completely dissociate for a little bit, and like read or like watch YouTube videos, and even if that's just a couple of days, that is really something that works for me. And I think for some people it is like routine, and like I do have a set word count that I know that I'm going to write or whatever, but again, it's like knowing that I'm going to have these, so it's like, it's structured in its way. It's not a haphazard, like hyper focus and no work. Like it's all very controlled. I know when I have to start again too.
But you give yourself permission to take that break and to
yes, absolutely. I do not believe in half-ass breaks.
Yeah.
If the words are not happening, get up. Don't sit at the computer and pretend for 12 hours that you're going to get around to writing.
I like that too.
You feel like you worked, but you didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm like this, I'm going to go off on a tangent. I'm like, I remember very clearly when I realized that like a lot of people who were spending a long time on a book just weren't writing.
Yeah, interesting.
And I was like, but you know, see, like they'd be sitting down at the computer, and I'm like, yeah, I know that there's an element of like not writing that is writing and blah 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 blah. But if it's mostly not writing, there's not going to be a book.
Yes, so true.
It's
really interesting.
So again, this comes back to the honesty.
Yeah,
you just have to be very honest. Yeah.
Sorry, we keep talking over each other, but I think what's interesting is that you said that you've only really kind of just worked that out, even though it's been happening for years. And I find that too. I'm not going to go into examples or whatever, but I feel like the last year or so has really taught me more about my writing process. Like I've suddenly realized a few things and sort of become more accepting of how I do things. And it's taken, you know, a decade to work out some things. I wonder what we'll find in another decade.
I feel like that kind of comfort with yourself and honesty with yourself, first of all, comes with age. I was just like careening around. I was sold in my 20s. I didn't know what I was doing.
Starting
just like, you know, like happily stumbling into things.
We both did some parenting too. Hey, have kids. Yeah.
Well, it's true. That's the beauty of being a young parent. That's what you do. You're like stumbling around and being like, oh, hopefully I like did more things right than I did wrong. And like, you know, and then you get to a certain age and you start asking why you do things.
Yeah.
And then also I think after 13 years in the industry, it's like, okay, how do I make like my practices more sustainable?
Yes.
Here I am.
Have another 13 years.
And I'm like, I'm in a fairly successful stage of my career. You know, I make enough money that I'm supporting my family off of it. So I'm past this, like you get past like this desperation stage, and then you go, what about my enjoyment? Like I'm not just getting new things anymore. So I'm figuring out how to maintain.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I would like to grow as well, you know, but at the same time, you're like, some of it is like, how do I find joy where I'm at? And like, what would be
so important. I feel exactly in the same stage in some ways, in terms of that. I know that if I want to sustain and keep doing what I'm doing, I have to be happy with what I'm doing, not with like the external sort of rewards and just joy from that. And I think allowing myself to, yes, I still need money, but it's kind of, it's a really, it makes you feel happier in yourself. And if you're happier in yourself, then you're happier usually when you're writing. Anyway,
I think they all support each other. Yeah. And so what we were just talking about goes better with my point that's lower, but I'm going to keep going in order or I'll forget what I'm doing. Staying published is harder than getting published. And I know that nobody who is trying to get published wants to hear that. I did not want to hear it. I was like, but that's not actually true. But the thing is, much like that, if you can do anything else, do it. If you love it, you'll sign on for the struggle.
Yeah.
So, but just know that it is a long game of persistence. And many times in this business, you will feel that persevering is an academic example of the triumph of hope over experience. Whether you're indie or writing for a publisher, sometimes staying in the game can feel harder than getting in the first place, which is another reason you don't have to have a good attitude, because it is hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're climbing up a sheer rock face, bloody knuckled. And I just like to tell people that because I want them to know that they're not alone in the struggle. Because the thing is, we're writers, so we're very good at telling a story. If you ask me, and I've done this, where you're like, I'm going to record a 2-minute TikTok video telling the story of how I got published. None of the low points are going to be in there. We're writers. We want a certain amount of tension, but we want to keep the narrative going. So not even to try to make yourself look better. You just like, you end up kind of making this neater story than actually exists when you retell it.
And then the people that are in it going through the bad stage, like I've got a number of friends recently who, you know, lose contracts or whatever, and it's a shock all of a sudden because they don't realize. And I say to them, don't worry, I know plenty of people who have been here and they've got to reinvent themselves. Yet it's, you know, it's one of those things that just happens that we don't really realize until it happens to us, you know, how.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like, That's why I like to say that. It's like, it's hard. So if you're in that space where you are struggling, like, just know that that is actually kind of an inevitable part of the process, and everybody has it. Like, you're not going to avoid that.
No, you may mention this further on, so forgive me if you do, but
Yeah.
have you've been rejected since getting published? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was sold my first book. So I had not had a rejection until after I was published. I didn't get rejected until after I was a best-selling author.
Yeah, wow.
And I got rejected while I was in New Zealand.
Yeah. Just recently, you're saying?
Just recently.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not personal. It's really not. It's like, there's just different things going on.
Yeah.
The publisher has other things. They don't need that right now. It's not like, I've just accepted it as part of it.
Yeah.
And I don't really get wound up about it. It's like, well, okay, I'm not doing that right now then.
Yeah.
Just keep this other thing. And like, so yeah, I consider rejection is not something to be avoided. If you try to avoid rejection, you're never going to send anything out.
Yes, so true.
I just look at it as, I don't even look at it as a failure. It's just part of this business. It's part of this job.
I love that. Yep.
So that's how I see it. And number 9 is, there is no wrong way to write a book unless it's not getting written.
I love that.
Every process is fair game.
Isn't she wise, everyone who's listening? This is why we wanted to share it with you, because all of this stuff is just so good. So no wrong way to write a book except being written.
Because one book might go quick and smooth and linear, and one you might be piecing together out of order, and one might be joyous and lovely and a gift book. That's what I call them. And the other one might be like actually pulling your teeth out.
How many gift books have you had?
I actually try to have amnesia about that. It's not like more even that than like what sells and what doesn't. Wow. It's like, I don't remember by the time it's over. That's actually like the only way that I compare writing a book to giving birth, is that you like forget the pain.
Yeah.
You trick yourself into doing it again.
That's so true. Sometimes like I always feel like it's really, really hard. And then I look back and I think, oh, that book wasn't so hard. And my close writing buddy says to me, yeah, you went through the same, ups.
Oh yeah, no, but I send out, so like Jackie Ashenden reads like all my chapters of books while I'm writing it. And I'll like send, I read Megan Crane and Nicole Helm's stuff as well. And like particularly Megan and I, as our books go on, you'll start getting emails from us with the chapter that it's like, Rory, chapter 5, and my hero is the biggest idiot of all time, and I hate him, and I want to drown him in the water, and like he is a beta douche, and blah blah blah. And like Jackie's like, oh, did your hero have a feeling, Maisey? Like, you do this every time. Or like I'll send a thing being like, this book is weird. She goes, oh, is your book weird? You think every book that you write is weird? I'm like, no, I don't. She's like, yes, you do. I'll be like, I love that book. And she's like, no, you hated it while you were writing it.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I didn't. I love that book. She's like, you don't. You hated it.
Makes me think, I don't know, again, is this one of your points that you're not the best judge? You're never the best judge of
No, that's actually part of this. It's like, in terms of process, like sometimes I think that I love a book, but what I really love is the concept of it. Yes. And like the execution's not great, and I need to be told it wasn't actually good. Mm-hmm. And other times it's like, just because I dislike the book doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. Yeah. I've had books where I felt like panicked and unsettled and unhappy the whole time I was writing them. And what I've learned is that it usually has more to do with my personal life than the book itself.
Yeah, so true.
Which I always say that about burnout too. People are like, oh, well, like, don't you get burned out writing that many books? And I'm like, no, usually if I feel burned out, it's because of the surrounding life pressures or publishing.
I heard that burnout is another word for life. Often, basically,
Basically, yeah. I'm like, sometimes the writing, what's going on in your life and what's happening like in the publishing, the business component of it makes you feel burned out. But I'm like, it's not really the writing that's the problem. There's some other stuff that you've got to close, like other tabs you've got to close first, I think.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So my point number 10 is, it's not all about the bottom line. And I say this because years and years ago, in context of something to do with publishing, this person kind of said to me when I was trying to make a decision, well, it's all about the bottom line. And I remember like, that's just one of those things that's like echoed in my head forever. And I have found that like after 13 years in publishing, looking at things in terms of what am I getting right now? This immediate bottom line is often really short-sighted because these are long range goals. Like more than 10 years ago, I got an email in my inbox from an author that I'd never met before, but who a lot of you have probably heard of, Lori Foster.
Yep.
And she said in her email that I was starting to write cowboys. I didn't have any cowboy books out yet. So no, everybody just knew me as writing for presents. But she had heard that I was writing cowboys and also that I was a really fast writer. And she was having a crisis with this charity anthology that she put out every year because an author had to drop out because of a personal issue. And they needed something written in like 5 days. And I said,
you can do, because you wrote 50,000 words last week.
and I said, yeah, I can do that. And the offer was for nothing, for no money. It was for charity. And, but I knew that it was going to HQN, which was like my dream imprint. And I had a cowboy series that wasn't out yet that I had sold to Penguin, but I really, really wanted to be doing cowboys for HQN. Yeah. I felt like they were more successful in that space. I liked their covers better. I liked everything about what they were doing with their contemporary romance program. And I had been rejected by an editor there. And this was going to a different editor. And I was like, great, I'll do this. And I wasn't really like thinking in a super calculated way. I just thought this can't be a bad thing. I'll be in an HQN anthology. I'm getting what I want, kind of, you know? So
right, because I can't write 50,000 words in a week, but I would have wanted to.
So I was like, I'll do it. I wrote the novella and I sent it off, and two things happened in that space of time between when I sent it and when I got my edits back. The editor who rejected me, who was the head of that imprint, left the company. And the editor who was editing the anthology was promoted to that position. She read my novella and she loved it. And suddenly she was the person in charge of who got bought for everything. And so she said, I'd like to work with you again. And I was like, great. And so that is a bottom line I could not have foreseen. That is how I got into HQN. That is how I ended up writing cowboy books that became quite successful. And that was not a door that I knew I was opening. And that's
also, I was going to say, that also shows one thing that I think it's hard in this business is there is so much luck involved. You know, if that editor was the first one there, then, you know, maybe you would have, you know, already been in it. And it's like, you know, you need that champion, but getting that champion involves a lot of luck sometimes. And that's
like, and then that is the thing, you cannot discount luck. Anyone who says they haven't
been number 11
who said no, it's not. It's just a continuation.
Bonus.
I'm saying luck is a component in this industry, absolutely, but you do have to show up with the work. Because had I said no, because I didn't see any value in it, because I wasn't getting paid right now, I wouldn't have the contract. I had to show up with the work. So it's like, you do, like, I think I see a lot of people who I feel like are sitting back going, when publishing proves to me that it's worth the work, I'll do it. It's a complicated thing, but I can just tell you I've witnessed that.
Yeah.
Where it's like people tell themselves they're going to behave differently, meet their deadlines, whatever, write more books if they become successful.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is backward.
Yeah.
You have got to do the work before it's giving you much of anything. But my point number 11 is actually that success is not just money.
So sex is not just money there.
Sex is not just money either, unless you're in a presents, in which case both, which is kind of nice. I always think I would have made such a good presents heroine, but it's really too late to go back and be a virgin secretary.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would make a good one. I wouldn't be able to put up with the men.
No, I mean, well, that's the other thing. I'm like, I'm way too old.
Like
when I was 21, I might have been, you know, able to put up with it, but
not now.
I'd be like, first of all, I could do the job better. And second of all, gross, go away.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm good, thanks.
Not
I am a rich man, so keep it over there.
Success is not just money.
Success is not just money.
What is success? Is that what you're going to tell us?
I just think success is all about the overall satisfaction and happiness in your life.
Yep.
Because you have to be like, I know people who have gotten themselves into positions where they were writing 18 hours a day in order to kind of maintain an income level that they got themselves stuck into. And it isn't that I've never been in this position,
Yeah.
But it's like, that is not living your life. And it's like, you have to find the balance that works for you, that allows you to enjoy your life. Like I am the breadwinner. So like, I say this as someone for whom money and publishing is very important.
Yes.
But I do take projects where I don't necessarily know how much money I make, or like with the charity project thing that I did, I know that I won't. And some of those decisions are tactical, and to work with a specific editor and get involved in something I haven't been before. But sometimes I just take on a project because I want to write it. And that's where my enjoyment matters. I'm like fostering the excitement for my creativity. I admire people who are very successful with indie publishing, but it is not my immediate skill set. I like to write, and I don't actually want all that extra control. People are like, oh, you should do it because you have so much control. I'm like, I don't want it. I don't want it. I want to write the book and send it in.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like traditional publishing suits me for that reason, because it allows me to focus on what I enjoy.
Yeah.
And I remember like, and this was in the early days when it was very like indie versus traditional, whereas I feel like now everybody just is like live and let live. So like in the early days, I believe it was the same person who said to me, it's all about the bottom line, was basically telling me I was dumb to stay in traditional publishing because I could make a higher percentage, you know, this, that, and the other. And I really just thought I would rather write a whole other book a year.
Yeah.
And make that money there than have to do all this stuff you're talking about, which is not writing and isn't what I'm here to do. And it's like, that is so great if that is what you are talented at and that is what you want to do.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's not all about having more and more. It's about building a life for yourself that makes you happy, because publishing is not separate from your life. It's part of it.
Yeah.
So if you're writing morning till night with no end in sight and you're angry every time you sit down and you dread it, then why are you doing it? Like for more money, to say you write a certain number of books a year. And like, you don't have to be happy all the time. I already made that point, but you should definitely be happy more than you aren't.
Yeah.
And you should not be grinding at the expense of your joy. So when you already have enough, what good does it do to have more?
Yeah.
To try and get more. Like you have to love your work and your stories, because otherwise you could like be in an MLM selling leggings. Why be in publishing? You could be a girl boss, like
on working 18 hours a day, as you said, doing that.
Exactly. Because it's like, if the work no longer matters and you've lost your perspective on what you're doing, then why not? I'm sure like, you know, you could at least take a brain holiday a little bit, you know? But it's just like, there's no guarantees. And the one thing that you can control is if you love and stand behind your stories. And if you're building a whole life where publishing fits along with everything else that you love. Like, you should never be doing this at the expense of your family, of your friends, of your vacations, of your life, of your other hobbies. Like, you are a whole person.
It's very easy to fall into that trap. You know, for years I did nothing, but, you know, I didn't sew, I didn't, you know, bake much. I mean, no, kids never got sacrificed because that was, but, you know, relationship probably did, and hobbies did, friends definitely did, because, you know, you just think that that's what you should be doing if you want it so hard. And then
I think in the beginning, the excitement about writing can sustain you a little bit more than it does when you've done 152 books.
Definitely, yes.
Oh, because you're like, oh, I'm new here and I'm very excited. And so it's like, if the balance is weighted toward writing in the beginning, or you're someone for whom that is true right now, I'm not judging you. I've been there.
Completely.
And I've been very happy doing it. I was very happy to do revisions on my second book in the hospispital after I had it. And now I would be like, no.
But 10 more minutes. I think there comes a time though when you go, I need to do other things because my life does need that sort of balance, and people are important, my family's important, and also just I feel like if you just write, you don't get ideas, you don't get that.
I agree. Yeah,
especially out in the world, fulfill the world. Yeah.
This one will be quick because we did already talk about this. Failure is to be expected. That's number 12.
Failure is to be expected.
Yep. And it's inevitable. And I think once you accept that, you don't need to have fear or shame surrounding it.
Yeah.
We don't want what we're working on to fail, but we can't let a fear of failure cripple us.
Failure is.
I mean, I think that is really interesting because it's like, for me, I think it does feel like when not as many people as I wanted to read the book.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the only real failure is if I stop when I don't want to. Because your goal can change. You can quit if you want. You don't have to be ashamed about that either.
Yeah.
But if a bad experience makes you quit when you don't want to, if it decides it's the end, not you, that to me would be failure. If it was something that I didn't decide.
Yeah.
But failure is going to happen. Success is going to happen too. No one's going to throw you a parade, so throw one for yourself.
I love that.
And then number 13 is remember why you started.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to say, for the established authors that might be watching this, resist the pull toward bitterness, because I'm going to tell you right now, it's easy to feel bitter, and it's easy to look at the mountain of your work and watch publishing fawn over a new author and someone who doesn't have your track record and wonder, why not me? It's not easy, and it's just crappy. And you want to be bitter, but that's poison, and not poison that will harm them. It'll harm you, because we are doing creative work. And you have to find something in yourself that loves the work. And if you are consumed by bitterness, you're not going to have that love. And if you take one thing away from this, it's that the stories matter, and like where they fit into your life matters. And I think that is the most important thing, is like, love yourself as a whole person, make writing support you, not just monetarily, but in these other ways. Like, don't let it drain you. Let it like sustain you.
Love that,
man.
Sustain you. Let it sustain you. I've got so many slogans from this that could go on like t-shirts.
So that's my whole thing, is like, those are 13 things I've learned, and there's so many more. And it's just, like I said, I would choose it every time, even when it is hard. And I don't have balance all the time. But again, part of my journey has been going, but you're very happy when you're consumed with a project. And then you're very happy to take 2 weeks off.
Exactly.
And so if I do it that work, why not?
And I just think that's the thing, is that, as you said, there's not one way to write a book, and there's not one way to be a writer.
No.
That
what works for you right now may not work for you later. Like,
you got to be
that is another thing. I always thought, when my kids are older, it'll be easier to write. And it's like, sometimes actually it's easier when they're not in school, which is the direct opposite of when they were little.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I was thought, when I was squeezing the writing time in when they were sleeping in naps or whatever, when they were tiny, and at night. And I thought, just wait till like one day I'll be able to do this all day, every day, and I'll be so much more productive and do so much more stuff. And it didn't actually work that way,
No.
And now they're demanding in other ways. So life, I was actually talking to my doctor about this yesterday. We're always in a stage where life is demanding, because, your kids might get older, but then your friends start getting sick, or, you look after aging parents, or, your partner, something happens to them. It's always
part of that human tendency we have to say, at this stage, it's going to be easier. At this stage, I will feel successful. Well, then I'll be satisfied. When I am successful, all of these broken things inside of me will be fixed. But what if we know that's not true? We write romance novels where people have to like do the hard work of healing themselves before they can fall in love. Like, it isn't just like, now I'm married and I'm healed. So like, that is like, you take you with you wherever you go, into success and into failure. So like, all of your stuff is coming with you.
Yep.
And that's why I think it's so important to find the joy where you are.
So true.
And find the balance where you are, and to kind of keep growing, changing, learning, asking yourself what you want, and just moving forward in that way, because you're not going to like hit a list and be happy forever. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
You're not going to get published and be happy forever with that.
So true. I think we're going to call this Maisey's 13 ways to sustain a successful writing journey. But before I let you leave, and I am going to let you go in a moment, because we have talked for a long time, you've shared so much wisdom and knowledge with us, and I'm really grateful to be able to hearing it again myself, because as I said, I was lucky enough to hear your keynote, but this time I've taken notes, and just I completely relate to everything you've said. And I think so many authors who are listening at different stages, whether they're just starting out, whether they're near where we are, or they've been doing it for a lot longer than us, I think will relate to what you say. So thank you. But you mentioned core story a couple of times. And I'm just going to ask you, one might be tricky, might be easy question to finish off. What is your core story that you see you do time and time again in your books?
I think there has been some shifting, for sure. But I would say that a repeat theme that you always see in my books is, especially with actually with both of the characters, is with the heroine, often she is wanting to be loved for who she is and not what she can do for people. And I refuse to examine that as an I will not look deep. I will not lift the lid on that.
Examine it. I'm just asking the easy question.
And I know that for him, often it is, do you still deserve to be loved after what you think you've done, or after these things that you feel make you unlovable? Because I think a lot of my core truth is that we all deserve to be loved because of who we are, even if some of those things are difficult. And not just because of what we can do or what we have accomplished, but because we just are worthy of love, particularly if we're willing to love and do the work and like be and show up and be a good person. And I like, regardless of what's happened in the past. So I think that is something that you see repeated over and over and over again in my books.
I love
they're basically redemption narratives.
Perfect, the redemption. And I know I said I was going to ask you only one question, but I want to say that how do you find, like, if someone has written say 10 or 25 books, how do you find your core story? Like, did you at some stage step back and sort of analyze all your books and go, I
did, with the help of another author who was the person who introduced me to the concept of core story when I was trying to write single title and I had only written category romance. And she said, okay, so find out what your core story is and figure out how to tell that in a small town romance.
We need to do another whole podcast about this.
Well, it's literally an hour-long workshop that I teach with Nicole Helm. So it's like, it is a kind of a big concept, but basically it was like, okay, stripping back the layers of this book, the window dressing of this book, what is the bottom line of his conflict? What is the bottom line of her conflict? Why couldn't they be in love? And what allows them to decide that they are in love? And when you reduced it to that, that is where I found that emotional core.
Interesting.
And the story I was telling over and over again. And basically that they're all worthy of love. And that is kind of it distilled. And I think, so that's how I would do it, is go, okay, well, why didn't they think they could be in love? And how did they figure out that they could be? And I think the emotional truth is in that.
Interesting. I'm going to have to go through back and look at my books. Well, we have run out of time, sadly, but I just want to say thank you again for being so generous with your experience, your wisdom, especially they're late at night there in Oregon. So thank you for, staying up.
Hey, I left my husband assembling furniture in the living room, and I'm hoping that by the time I come back in, it's done.
Yeah, and just given up and thrown in the towel and gone.
Yeah, probably, because I wasn't.
Everyone, if you haven't read one of Maisey's books yet, please check them out. There's 152 to choose from, or there might not be 152 out yet, but there's quite a lot. So you've got choice. And I think on your website, which is maiseyyates.com, you have sort of am I right that you have like a theme finder?
Yeah. So you can search by preferred trope.
You can find exactly the type of book you love. Maisey has written it, I'm sure. So thanks again. And don't forget to follow Maisey on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok now. Yes. Well, thank you. And I'm sure everyone will enjoy this chat, and we might get to talk about core story another time.
Yes, let's do that.
Thank you. Bye, Maisey.